What you're about to experience is one man's quest to see beyond the tumultuous period we're in and to envision what lies just beyond our grasp, yet well within our reach. Welcome to Larry Rifkin's America Trends, where the future has arrived, and it's just in time.
America Trends podcast is back, available to you wherever you are, whether you're listening at home or in your car or a special device that you're jogging along to us with. We welcome you and thank you very much. Hope you listen time and again. We've got over 100 episodes there available to you on a whole range of topics. And John Krofsik is with me, of course. I'm Larry Rifkin. How are you, John?
I'm here.
You
Good.
are here, and you will never disappear. You're always a part of the act, forever and ever. But we have had this gentleman on before who we are going to be reintroducing today. His name is Bob Powell. He writes for The Street and USA Today. And an old friend of ours, he scared me recently with an article suggesting that, John, we may have to work until, well, what date did he put on that? Oh, the 12th of never, in order to survive in retirement.
Now that is scary. Holy cow. He wrote that?
Well, he didn't say the 12th of never, but he might as well have said that. And this is the case for a lot of folks who really had not had a lot of opportunity to save toward retirement. And look, you can be thrown off your game for a lot of reasons. You could have health problems, so it's interrupted your stream of making money. You could find that you go back for more education, and yet you go into debt for that, or for a child, maybe a child who lost their way and now you're raising your grandkids. I mean, John, you know how many reasons there are for this.
Oh, yeah. At a moment's notice, life can change. So, yeah, I mean, that could happen to anybody.
In fact, when I was visiting a shelter in the city from which we emanate, they were just telling us of a guy from one of the rich suburbs who really fell on hard times, and he's now in the shelter. His wife left him with the children, and there he is. He lost his job. I mean, just all kinds of horrific things. And look, people make bad decisions. They make bad investments. These things can happen. But you really want to try to get yourself on the sturdiest and most durable path toward retirement as early as you can. And Bob has told us that many times.
Yeah, that's. And I keep nagging my kids because I want to make sure that they're putting away because it may be hard for us, but, if you look at what's going on in the world, it may be even harder for them.
Yeah, and I think we were willing to sacrifice a lot more than they are today.
Right.
They're not looking as far down the road as we did. And again, I think that's because the generation that raised us came from very little.
Right.
And
they knew
right,
hunger.
exactly.
They knew hunger.
And my dad, for example, who had a congenital heart problem, he actually died with no money, no insurance, and that really left a mark on me. And I decided I had to learn a little bit about money myself. And I was very cautious, very careful. But I was more the tortoise than the hare. I never went for wild schemes. I never got caught up in too much real estate when it was just bulging. So you got to be very mindful. But we're going to give you a lot of the things that you need to think about, whether you're not near retirement, but you're thinking about it, whether you're getting close to it, approaching it, or whether you're in it. Bob Powell can talk us through all of these various stages.
Absolutely. But you know what? I don't care what age you are. If you've started working, you should start thinking about the future as young as you can.
Yeah, even in your 20s and 30s.
Even in your 20s, yeah, because
so
you want to have that million to retire on.
Oh, I know. And is million really the benchmark anymore? So we know that there are tons of magazines, books, self-help programs. I mean, how often do you hear that ad? Ken Fisher tells you, don't buy annuities. And by the way, Ken Fisher said, if you have $500,000, we're anxious to talk to you. If not, well, go down the street to Edward Jones or whatever it may be. Well, we are going to start today getting you on the right path toward retirement, thanks to our good friend, Bob Powell. With us on America Trends is Bob Powell. He's a retirement guru. The only thing you've done wrong about retirement is the fact that you haven't retired yourself yet with all the incredible advice you've been giving to others.
I haven't, Larry. But that's not because I can't retire, um, though that's partly true. The other is I enjoy writing about retirement, and I enjoy helping other people. So I get a chance to do that at the street, and I get a chance to do it for at USA Today.
Oh, absolutely. People read you everywhere, see you on a YouTube channel. We'll talk about that toward the end so you can tell everyone where they can get more of this incredible information. But Bob, we've known you for a long time and always trusted the information that you have provided to us. You're telling us now in a new piece that Americans are more likely to enter retirement in debt than ever before. That might surprise people.
Well, I think it might surprise people, but not the people who might be on the precipice of retiring. And I think what's happened to these folks is it's a couple things. One is they have mortgages, and there was a time when people used to have a mortgage burning party, and then they would retire, and then they would live happily ever after. But what's happened, I think, is that people have upsized their homes and now have larger mortgages. And then if that hasn't happened to them, they probably took out a home equity line of credit on their home, and now they have both a first mortgage and a home equity line of credit, and they're retiring with this debt. And what they're finding is now that these expenses, mortgage payments, are running out to be 30-some-odd% of their expenses in retirement, and that's just a huge burden. And the other thing that's happened, in addition to both home mortgages and equity line of credit, is that parents are taking out student loans for their children, Parent Plus loans, so they're retiring with mortgage debt, student loan debt, and then add to it whatever credit card debt and auto loan debt that they may have. And so what we're finding is that people who should be retiring with little to no debt are now burdened with all this debt and either have to really keep working because they can't retire because they have to service this debt, or they're retiring to a standard of living that they didn't anticipate, i.e. lower than what they wanted.
Bob, is there a rule of thumb about retiring with a mortgage? I know there are some advisors who think it's advisable to do that and never pay it off. I know Rick Edelman is one who says that all the time.
Yeah, I think so. This is an interesting question because I plan to do a story about it because I think some of this has changed in the wake of the tax bill. So there was a time when if you were itemizing your deductions and you still had a relatively high interest expense from your mortgage, it might have been worth it to retire with debt, presuming that you could service the debt. And there's that age-old sort of rule of thumb that would say, you would pay down your debt if interest rates were this, and you would and not pay it down if interest rates were Y. And I think that goes away with the new tax law, in essence, because you now have lost the interest deduction, possibly. Even though your standard deduction has gone up, it's possible that your interest rate is now below the standard deduction, and you get no benefit largely from that. So I think it would be wise in some cases to start aggressively paying down your mortgage before retirement, especially if you're not going to be able to itemize the deduction and benefit from it. For all you have is standard deduction, that interest deduction really does benefit you.
Is there any rule of thumb? I mean, there are a lot of people out there listening, and they have some debt, but they've also got a lot of assets. So say you have a $50,000 mortgage, and yet you have $2 million in assets. So that shouldn't worry you if that ratio exists, right?
No, it shouldn't. I mean, everything is fact-based, circumstance-based, and so, the people who can afford to carry a mortgage into retirement, by all means. I'd say the vast majority of average Americans, the big thing that happens is, as you enter retirement, you want to get rid of as many obligations as possible, right? Because what happens when you enter retirement is you'll face so many more risks that you didn't face when you were saving for retirement. So those could include the death of a spouse, inflation, divorce, a healthcare shock, right? And all these things, no one ever prepares for these things, right? And that's part of the problem is that most people, when they're planning for retirement, have like a 1-year horizon. They're not sort of looking down the road and saying, what assets will I need just in case this happens, right? Most people don't have 3 to 6 months or 12 months of living expenses set aside. Most people don't have money set aside for, quite frankly, even for home repairs, a new roof, a new boiler, a new, a new electrical system. So the rule of thumb, I think, going forward is if you're stretched at the moment, you should probably think about getting rid of any of those obligations, and especially the high interest obligations, whether it's you're carrying a balance on your credit card or you have an auto loan. And certainly in the case of student loans, Parent Plus loans, you might want to look at consolidating so that you can reduce maybe the total principal and interest expense.
And you talk about financial fragility, and that sounds like fragility to me, that many people are really in these places where they can't afford to make one mistake or have one great need that pops up and really destroys any planning they've done.
Right, and I think that's a problem. Many people, right, in the world of behavioral finance, people have present bias, right? They think that tomorrow will be the same as today, and more often than not, it might be. But the problem is, you really need to think about the next 5 years and 10 years, and think about all these possibilities. In fact, I'm going down to Orlando tomorrow to give a speech on the 15 retirement risks that you'll face. And quite frankly, they're overwhelming. And the thought is, if you had to sort of manage, mitigate, hedge against all these risks that you might face, well, you probably wouldn't have a standard of living. But the point is, I think you really need to think about these risks and then check off whether you are managing it in part, in full, or you don't want to manage it at all. But you can't be an ostrich and stick your head in the sand as you think about all these things that could go wrong. And I think, one of the things that really goes wrong, it's interesting, I just wrote a column. It was a professor of Stanford University that did a study that looked at whether you should save more or work longer as the best way to ensure a standard of living.
Well, I don't want to turn the entire audience off yet. We will talk about that, particularly those who are thinking of retirement. We'll get to that. But I've got to ask you this. There are so many of these planners, and they may be with a mutual fund company or independent, and they try to run out these numbers for us, Bob, and tell us, well, I think that with the resources you have and the way that you spend and the like, that you're good until you're 92, or you have an 80% chance, or 70. How much can they factor in all the variables that you're talking about?
Not very well. I mean, the problem is that most of the software that people use have some limitations around what you're putting into the calculation. So I think they're good at doing some things, but not necessarily a complete and comprehensive look at what you might need. So a lot of folks will look at, okay, if all things being equal, if you have this desired standard of living and it costs X thousand dollars and your portfolio is Y, using this Monte Carlo simulation, you should be able to, your money will last, like you said, till age 92, 90% of the time, and you'll have a shortfall of 10% of the time. And that's all well and good if tomorrow is the same as today. But if tomorrow turns out to be the day that you get divorced and you have to split your retirement assets and your house in half, well, all those assumptions go away, right? So, or let's say that the market as it exists today not only fell 7%, but fell 25% and then started trading down there. Right now you have a lower asset base from which to calculate your retirement withdrawals. So all of a sudden, all these assumptions that you make in today's world are different tomorrow. And I think that sort of speaks to one thing, Larry, that everyone keeps I keep reminding people in my columns is the need to make course corrections in retirement is so much greater than when you're saving for retirement. In retirement, you have to be looking at all the levers, not maybe each and every day, but maybe quarterly and certainly annually, to look at all the things that you might need to change. Do you need to change how you're investing your money? Do you need to change your sources of income? Should you return to work to get some earned income? Should you reduce your expenses? Right? Should you downsize your home? Right? All these factors, I think you have to start weighing these things because the resources become finite, and the time to correct mistakes becomes all the shorter. Right? There's very little time to correct, to recover from a stock market decline. When you've got a 10-year horizon, right? When you're 20, you can afford to suffer through one or two or three bear markets. But when you're 65, you might be able to suffer through one bear market, but not necessarily for a long-term bear market.
We'll return to this episode of America Trends in just a moment. If you like what we're doing here at America Trends Podcast, please don't keep it to yourself. I know there are a lot of people, John, who think, well, if I'm listening and somebody else wants to listen at the same time, maybe we're going to collide and they're not going to be able to hear us.
Yeah.
Is that the way the technology works?
No, there's plenty of bandwidth. Everybody can listen at the same time.
All right. Well,
make
that
sure you do
dispels
that.
that myth. Now, you can do a number of things that would really be helpful to us. You could give us a kind rating or a review at Apple Podcasts, and that boosts what they consider to be our value and visibility. And what does that do, John?
Well, that puts us in the forefront so that you can find us easier, and most important is other people can find us easier.
And you can subscribe there or on our site, americatrendspodcast.com, or wherever you're listening, so we can alert you to new episodes of the podcast, which, by the way, we put out twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And stay in touch with us on both Facebook and Twitter at Trends Podcast. Or you can like us on Facebook or follow us where, John?
On Twitter.
On Twitter. That's right, where the world turns to hear fake news or whatever it is. Well,
Not
you can
us, though.
direct
We
message
have real
us
news.
at Trends Podcast or using hashtag Trends Podcast. And you know, John, with our growing audience, and really it's been pretty remarkable, a lot of people just came to us the last month or two, and they might have missed earlier episodes. Can they get them again?
They can look through them and pick the ones they want to listen to. They're all on the website, and a lot of them are up on iTunes, many of them.
All right. Well, listen, there's lots of material to listen to. We hope you have the time, and we'll lend it to us because we try to make it worth your while. And thanks so much for listening.
And tell your friends.
We now return to this episode of America Trends. Bob, do you still subscribe to the notion of the go-go time in retirement in the 60s and early 70s, then the slower go and the no-go? For example, if you're 65 and you're in good health and you're together, you think about a lot of travel. But as you get older, if you've budgeted $15,000 or $20,000 a year for that, there still is a greater likelihood as you go forward you will not be using that money. You'll be staying home more. Now, you may have more health-related needs, but then do you have long-term care? And there are so many other factors that enter in. But that whole notion of go-go, slow-go, and no-go, is that still operable in your mind?
Yeah, I think that's operable. And you know, the interesting thing is there's been some research that's been done that says that people actually need less income as they go through these three big phases. And to a degree, that's true. But if you are in the third phase, in the no-go years, and you do have a health problem, well, it's quite possible that you'll have the same expenses, same gross expenses that you did in the go-go years, but instead of that money being dedicated to travel and grandkids and gifts and whatnot, it's now being spent on home health aides. So I'm not necessarily going to espouse that people plan on the possibility of needing less income as they age. In fact, I think they may need more income, but the composition of those expenses change.
I understand your point. What about going debt-free? I mean, in terms of trying to consolidate a lot of things right now, say you're in your early 60s, you're listening to this, and you realize that some of the things you have checked off in terms of high-interest loans are things that they still have outstanding. What should you do most immediately?
Well, so this is it was an interesting study done where people, when they approach their debt, be it credit card, auto loans, mortgages, what they tend to do is to pay equally across all these debts that they have, when the better thing to do would be to tackle the highest interest rate debt first, and use the effect of whatever extra income you have to dedicate it to paying down the highest interest debt, and then as soon as you pay that down, go on to the next highest interest rate one. And most people don't do that, but that is perhaps the preferred method in the way that at least reduce your overall interest payments on all your various debts. So I would recommend that if you have credit card debt, certainly approach it that way. And then if you don't have credit card debt, whatever debt you have, be it, your auto loan or something else, that you just pay it down as soon as possible. I think, being debt free also gives you some financial freedom. So people might say, I have a pool of money. I have $100,000 and I have a $10,000 auto loan. But if I pay down the auto loan, I will only have $9 right? $90,000, and so, but the net effect is that you don't have that payment anymore, right? You don't have that 300 or 200 or 400 or whatever payment it was that you were paying on your auto loan. That goes away, and that in a way that frees. True, you have less assets, but you haven't necessarily reduced your net worth. What you've done is, you've created an extra $300 that you could spend on something, that you might enjoy doing. And I might add, I'm in the middle of reading Being Mortal, Larry. I don't know if you've ever read it.
Oh yeah, I have. Mr. Atunde, was it, or what?
Yeah, Gawande, Atul Gawande. And it's interesting. He quotes some research done by a professor out of Stanford, who looked at what makes people happy as they age. And it's not necessarily acquiring things as they age, right? What they'd rather do is spend time with family and friends and not necessarily be buying things. So I think people also need to realize that, what their wants and needs are going to change dramatically as they age. And then they don't need an expensive car. They don't need to carry debt, right? What will give them financial freedom and peace of mind, which is really what people want in retirement, right? Is to sort of be free from worry, is to not have to service debt.
Oh, absolutely. But if you've got a lot of those folks whom you love who want stuff from you, well, tell them to take it from the existing stuff that you're trying to get rid of. Let me ask you this. What about a reverse mortgage? We've heard so many stories about reverse mortgages, and some have been nightmares, and others have said, well, it's getting better, and there are more safeguards. What do you say, Bob Powell?
Yeah, so I don't have a reverse mortgage. I'm not old enough to have one. You have to be 62. But as an instrument, as a tool that you can use, I'm in favor of it. So what the current thinking is by researchers like Wade Powell and others is that you would take out a HECM, a home equity conversion mortgage, with a line of credit at age 62, but not touch it, right? You just want to sort of put it in place. And what you would do is, when the time comes for you to start withdrawing your money from your retirement accounts, you would use the line of credit instead of taking money from your retirement account if the market was down, right? One of the things that people talk about doing is it's called sequence of return risk, and it's the risk of the possibility of you withdrawing money from your retirement accounts as the market's declining, which means that you're pulling money away and from a declining asset. So the better thing to do would be to say, okay, I'm going to take the money from my reverse mortgage line of credit, whatever amount that would have been I would have taken from my retirement account, and I'll use that money. And then when the market goes back up, I'll take the money from the retirement account and also pay back the money into my line of credit. So you use it as sort of a revolving credit so that you don't have to watch your asset decline and then pull money from an asset that keeps declining, right? So,
now explain that again, because a lot of people might do that with a HELOC, the home equity line of credit. What's the difference?
Well, one of the big differences, I think, is that the HELOC. In many ways, it's the same. You still have to pay it back. I think it's the issue with the HELOC is that after 10 years, most of them balloon, and that the principal and right now you're just paying probably interest only. So as long as you're not getting yourself into trouble, you can probably get a HELOC and do the same thing. The problem that happens with most people, if they can't get a HELOC, this reverse mortgage with a line of credit is the best option, because a lot of times people, when they age and they turn 65 or they're retired, they don't have adequate enough income, or maybe they don't have adequate enough equity in their homes to get the HELOC. So it's another tool, and I think people need to evaluate both those tools and the pros and cons of those tools. If you can't get a HELOC, and you can make sure that you're not going to get in trouble with your HELOC years from now, the reverse mortgage might be the better tool.
That's a great point, because as you go into retirement, you don't have that steady paycheck. So if somebody wants a W-2 to demonstrate your ability to pay something back, even if you have a lot of assets, do you find people getting a little frustrated? Because historically, you've been able to show the fact that you've got an employer, you've got all these benefits, therefore you're a good risk. What do you say to people who find themselves now with a lot of assets, but they do want to use somebody else's money, and they might find it more difficult to get that money?
Yeah, it's a big problem. I think that what people need to do is to think about that sort of in advance retiring and make sure that they have all the lines of credit in place that they want. It's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine who's out in the Chicago area, and it was in the wake of the Experian Equifax breach, and he froze all his accounts and says, "And I don't want any more. I'm never going to borrow again." and so I don't
need to know what my rating is.
Right. So he froze all the accounts, and then no one could ever do a credit check on him again, I think. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because at the moment he probably doesn't need any more debt. He probably won't, he probably has enough assets to fund whatever he wants to fund. But again, if ever came there a chance to need to borrow money and you don't have a source of income, banks may turn you down. So I think people just need to sort of think about that. The other thing I think people need to think about too is I wrote this story the other day about what to do in anticipation of your spouse dying, and the notion was if you're the husband and you have a credit card and your wife is an authorized user on the credit card, that doesn't necessarily mean that she has good credit. So you still want to make sure that your spouses have credit cards in their name too, just in case. You don't need to carry balance on it, but just to be in a position where if you needed a credit card, you'd have at least some credit record.
That's a very good point. And before we get back to the key to a secure retirement, which you wrote about recently, and it's something that I don't like to think about necessarily, but that whole notion of how much spouses should really know about the financial picture. I know my wife gives me a lot of leeway to work on these things, but I bring her into every consequential interaction that I have about it. So tell me what spouses should be doing to make certain that they each understand where they are.
Well, so this is a big problem, right? Because sometimes, the common thing that you hear all the time is, "Oh, my wife's not interested in money," and so I handle it myself.
Except the outflow portion.
Right.
No, just kidding.
Right. So I think what spouses need to maybe quarterly, maybe semi-annually sit down and sort of review how much they have in their brokerage accounts and their bank accounts and their 401ks. What the outstanding loans might be, how they're paying them down, what kind of insurance they own, how much they're paying. And if they don't have a financial planner, what I might recommend is there's a growing number of financial planners who will meet with someone on an hourly basis or on a project basis. And it's not necessarily a case where you have to go in with $1 million and then pay someone 1% of your $1 million to have them manage it. But there's a growing number of advisors who will, for a fee, give your plan or build you a plan. Give your existing plan a once over or build you a plan. And I think that might be worthwhile because I think a lot of times maybe men are hesitant to talk to their spouses about money. Their wives may be hesitant to ask about the money, and having a third party, objective, disinterested person hand walk you through these things, could be very helpful. My wife, for instance, she works at a university, and they have a session coming up where the 401k plan sponsor and the health insurance and the life insurance people are all going to do a financial fair. And she said, "Should I go to it?" And I said, "Yeah, of course. Yeah, go to it." That too could be a spark for us to talk about our money. So I think, having the ability to talk to someone else, because, obviously,
yeah, absolutely.
No one has all the answers, right?
No.
I mean, and
but Bob, then she's going to want you to bring all those assets back from offshore. No, I'm only kidding. Now,
including the Bitcoin, yeah.
Yeah.
if I can find it.
Yeah, they're worth a little bit. Now, the key to a secure retirement, you wrote recently, so I'm going to throw your words right back at you. You say the key to a secure retirement isn't saving more. So folks are on the edge of their seats. So what is the key?
So the research that was done suggested that working longer is the key, and for a couple reasons. So in the case of the John Chauvin research out of Stanford, what they looked at was if you were to bump up the amount that you save by 1 percentage point from, say, 9 to 10% per year at age 36 versus just working another 3 to 6 months or a year or so, the thought was that extra savings would not materially affect your standard of living retirement, but working longer would, and working longer does that for a couple reasons. One is it forces you to save for a longer period of time. It helps you earn more money. It helps you delay taking Social Security, which increases the size of your Social Security paycheck. It delays the time for which you can take money from your retirement account. It increases the widow's benefit, the survivor's benefit, potentially. And so all these things, it has a much more dramatic effect working longer than actually saving more. Now, when I talked to Chauvin, and what he said was, if you can save more and work longer and delay taking Social Security, all those three things would be additive, and that would be best case. But if you only had the choice between saving more and working longer would be the far better thing. You get the bigger retirement bang for your buck. The other interesting thing, though, about working longer is it's not fail-safe. So the Employee Benefit Research Institute did a study. They do an annual study, and each year they ask people, did you plan on working longer? And they say yes. And then they ask what happened, and they said, well, half of them were unable to work longer for various reasons, healthcare shock, retiring because the company had layoffs, or maybe their spouse needed caregiving, et cetera, et cetera. So working longer is only going to work for half the people, and you don't know which half you'll be in, whether you're in the half that can work longer or in the half that can't work longer. So my advice, though tongue-in-cheek, better thing to do is to work longer, is to do both if you can. Increase the amount that you save by at least 1% per year. 1 percentage point per year.
But if you didn't want to work longer, and you're listening to this and you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s, should you really just try to put the gas down on the pedal or put the pedal on the metal to make certain that you really can save more to avoid having to make this decision later on?
Yeah, I think that's the fail-safe plan is, what if I can't work longer, then I need to save more now. And I think people need to make that trade-off, which is saving more today means possibly lowering your standard of living today in hopes that, you'll get the standard of living that you want later in life, versus enjoying the standard of living that you have today in the possibility that it will be lower later in life. And it's really hard to tell, right, which will happen. So
absolutely. And Bob, there are a lot of people I know who have this notion that I'm going to claim Social Security at 62 or 63 because I don't trust the government. I don't trust that they're not going to run out of money. My feeling is, as much as I share some of that, is that, in fact, any of the obligations to people 60 and over or 55 and over, I think are pretty much locked in. Do you agree or disagree, or can anyone know that?
I think it's locked in. It's the toughest question of all, right? Everyone keeps kicking the can down the road. So, at some point, someone's going to pay the price for, the shortfall that exists. And I fear it might be my children.
And grandchildren and on.
And grandchildren, right.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't think it's this cohort of those who are retiring in their late 50s, early 60s, but I may be wrong.
No, I don't think it's that cohort. I think, if anything will happen is sort of like what happened, I think it was under the Reagan administration, right, when we put in place the gradual increase in the full retirement age up to 67. And that took place, over years and decades. And so there was a long runway that people could prepare for the possibility that they weren't going to get full retirement age at 65, but 67, close to 67 in my case. And I've had plenty of years to prepare for that because that happened back in started in the 80s. And I think this, if someone has the courage to do something like what was done under the Reagan administration, which is, put together a commission, bipartisan, and let's either do a couple things, right? We could raise. I don't think it necessarily means cutting benefits for future beneficiaries, right? I really think that there are a couple tweaks that could be done today that could go a long way, including maybe eliminate the cap on current income in terms of what goes towards Social Security. Right, the current cap is $100,000 raise that, that could go a long way toward getting rid of the shortfall.
In closing, I know the markets go up and down. Lots of people in the recent period thought it only went one way up. Can you calm people's nerves and just remind them about the cycles in the market and how best to gird themselves in relation to this?
So I don't know how much time we have, but I'm going to do it in two ways, Larry. One is to say that if you don't have what's something called an investment policy statement, you ought to have one. And an investment policy statement is, in essence, a blueprint for your investments. It tells you how much you're going to allocate into which assets, stocks, bonds, cash. It tells you when you're going to rebalance. It tells you what your capital market expectations are, what your inflation rate expectations are, what your cash flow needs might be, right? If you were going to build a house, you wouldn't just do it, throwing wood and nails at something, right? But that's what many people do with their investments. They go into it without a plan. So if you don't have an investment policy statement, you should create one. And you can easily Google IPS or investment policy statement, and you'll find plenty of them at like Vanguard and T. Rowe Price and the CFA Institute and other places. And you can create an IPS. And that will give you some comfort, because then at least you know, I don't need to panic if the market goes down, because it's in line with my plan. I expected these things to happen because of, whatever. Because I said I wouldn't panic if the market went down by 27%. The other thing I'll tell you is I once had the pleasure of interviewing a gentleman named Winslow Weber after the 1987 market crash. And Winslow Weber was, I think at the time, in late 80s. And he was an active stockbroker back in the crash of 29, and then and also an active broker in the crash of 87. Still working in the brokerage industry. And I had lunch with him at the Union Club in Boston, and over tomato soup I asked what advice he had for people, and he said, "These things go in cycles." And I thought, I guess they do, Mr. Weber, and so these cycles, they do come and go. You just have to survive them. You have to have this staying power to last from 1929 to 87, I suppose.
Did he say grasshopper? Did he suggest that? Did he put you on his knee? Well, that sounds like great advice. It really does.
He asked me if I could grab the oyster cracker from his hand.
Bob Powell, it's always such a pleasure. Remind us where we can read you, see you, hear you, experience you in full high fidelity.
Oh, sure. Okay, so I'm on thestreet.com, and you can find all my retirement columns there by just searching my name. I'm also being published by USA Today every Friday on their website, and it too is about retirement. But you can also go into the search bar at usatoday.com and key in my name, and you should be able to find all the columns I've written at USA Today.
And you can find him on America Trends. Thank you so much, Bob Powell, again for being with us here on our podcast.
Thank you, Larry. I really appreciate it, Larry. Thank you.